Hello class, so we're getting to natural law and human rights, and more specifically natural law by way of St. Thomas Aquinas. So I have you reading a chapter out of a textbook by McKinnon and Fiala. Okay, so now, of course, we're progressing to natural law theory of ethics, whereby our chapter opens with a reference to Thomas Jefferson's famous line from the Declaration of Independence from 1776. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men or people are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," end quote. So, of course, this is an expression of natural law. So recall that these truths are self-evident and likewise inalienable. They can't be taken away from us, right? They're self-evident, meaning that we understand this by nature, okay? And then, as McKinnon and Fiala point out, this is a direct reference to an earlier natural law theorist and philosopher of the 17th and early 18th century, John Locke, from his second treatise on government. For Locke, if all people possess the same basic nature, then we also deserve to be treated equally, right? And so the difference is with the pursuit of happiness for Thomas Jefferson and the right to own property for Locke, okay? So in other words, instead of the way in which we have the wording in the Declaration of Independence, according to Jefferson, that among these inalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For Locke, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit, and the right to own property. Okay, and so this little detail, this premise of a right to own property for Locke is often cited as his inception of modern libertarianism, interestingly enough, and also as a justification for land rights based on agriculture and work. Incidentally, a key difference between Native American land rights at the time and English land rights of the time. And of course, this is grandfathered in to our country's founding, okay? The United States founding philosophy by way of natural law and libertarianism. So there are natural law elements in the Declaration of Independence that are basically inspired by John Locke as well, who was a natural law philosopher. So herein we get a basic sketch of what natural law theory has to do with, namely that we naturally share the rights, or we share rights across and regardless of culture, religion, or political affiliation, okay? So, yet that's not the whole story of natural law. There's more to it than that, okay? So you don't want to stop there. So there's a central tenet that we've already established with Aristotle, interestingly enough, so of whom we owe a debt of gratitude in the establishment of not only virtue ethics, but also the establishment of natural law. Both ethical frameworks rely on an Aristotelian heritage, right? So virtue ethics and natural law have an Aristotelian heritage. To be sure, this cannot be overemphasized. A basic tenet of natural law is that moral and ethical laws are known to us by way of reason, okay? So that's a central tenet of natural law theory that is inherited from Aristotle. So let's hold on to that, right? So always know too that rules, laws, guidelines, structures, principles are emblematic of our use of reason and rational cognition. To understand any law, okay, to understand any law, ethical, natural, civil, or criminal, is to understand our relation to ourselves, others, and of course nature. Again, understood rationally by way of reason and rational cognition, okay? So that's key there, right? Another task we must establish is the difference between laws of nature and natural law theory, okay? So in other words, the difference between something that is descriptive and something that is prescriptive. So for instance, laws of nature, for instance, the law of gravity, according to Sir Isaac Newton, whereby we see that every object in the universe attracts every other object with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. According to Sir Isaac Newton, this is the law of gravity. So this is a descriptive and deterministic law of nature, okay? So, yet it is not to be confused with the normative way in which we understand natural law theory, okay? The normative way in which we understand natural law theory is as a prescriptive law. This is to indicate how we ought to behave, not necessarily how we normally act. How we ought to behave, how we should behave, how we ought to behave ethically, right? So looking to what is natural for a natural law ethicist is never to simply to go and find what is natural in nature, right? And follow that. Or to discover the laws of nature and such as the law of gravity, Newton's law of gravity, to somehow live according to that. That is not to be confused with natural law theory as an ethical theory. So natural law, ethically, is a way to access that which is rational and innate to us all. Yet there's more, okay? So there's even more to it than that. So when we look to St. Thomas Aquinas, the medieval scholastic and avid Aristotelian, in a way will clarify that that Aristotle is known for virtue ethics, and in Aquinas' context, virtue ethics then becomes natural law ethics. So in other words, Aquinas still was Aristotelian, yet after Aquinas, we understand his ethical theory to be known as natural law theory, okay? So also remember that natural law has a strong and evident Stoic lines of thought, with the recognition, for example, that our innate reason is a way in which we stoically control and organize our virtue toward the logos of the world and of others, right? Ourselves, the world, our community, etc., right? And our environments as well, right? So with Aquinas, we must recognize a synthesis of Christian theology as it's synthesized with Aristotelian philosophy or Aristotelian ethics. As a matter of fact, his magnum opus, Aquinas' magnum opus, is the Summa Theologica, written over a period of 9 years, sometime between 1265 and 1274, and I don't think it was actually finished. So as McKinnon and Fiala indicate, it is likewise the Summa, a synthesis of Christian faith and reason, right? So it was a textbook. So even as Aquinas is Christian, okay, so we can't forget that he's Christian, his ethics are not to be confused with divine command theory. Hence, reason and rational cognition take on a central role as an extension of God's reason, right? And of course, our innate reason. To be clear, we are natural creatures, right? Embodied with a physical body in a community of others in relation to nature itself, our environment. in that position, we aim to preserve our bodies and our relations with others in our environment, right? As our aim toward the good. So that aiming toward the good still follows through with Aquinas, as we had with Aristotle's eudaimonia, right? Yet in this case, it's ultimately toward God's perfection, right? All of this is recognized with reason as much as it's a choice of free will. So in other words, Aquinas does not believe in the way that we are predetermined by God, okay? So for Aquinas, we are reasonably free to aim for the good, okay? So let's repeat that. We are reasonably free to aim for the good. So it's a combination of freedom, reason, and then also an aim toward the good, and likewise an aim for a good life, right? So also, whenever we stray away from the good, we edge toward evil. So a privation of the good. Evil is an absence of the good, okay? So for Aquinas, so an absence of the aim for the good and for the good life. That's how we understand evil in the context of Aquinas. So in fact, evil in this sense is an absence of the good by way of free will as well, right? So, or better said, as a free will, or as a free and a free intentional or unintentional deviation from the good, okay? So I'm having you stop at page 143, and we're switching over from McKinnon and Fiala to an article from the Summa Theologica,